Thank you for joining us today, Clay. We're really excited to have a fishery leader zooming in from Hawaii is where you're at right now. I'm lucky enough to be in Alaska at the moment. So we've got the two other states of the non-lower 48 chatting today about what's going on in the Western Pacific region and with Clay's experience in fisheries out of Hawaii and the Western Pacific. And we're really excited to learn from Clay. He's based in Kailua, Hawaii. Passion and career has centered really around sustaining Hawaii's fisheries for future generations. And Clay is the director of the Cooperative Fisheries Research, or is the director for Cooperative Fisheries Research for the Pacific Islands Fisheries Group. It's a nonprofit organization that supports cooperative research and fisheries and community education, really kind of empowering that knowledge to keep everybody informed of what's going on with fisheries, and does a lot of outreach for the US Pacific Island region. Clay works closely with the fishing community and agencies on coordinating their research and activities, including NIMS, surveys on bottom fish, SK fishery development grants, and a lot of other fisheries research projects. So we're going to have a lot to learn from Clay today. He's a current member of the Western Pacific Fisheries Management Council Advisory Panel and the Inter-American Tropical Tuna Commission. He's also recently appointed as a member of NOAA's Marine Fisheries Advisory Committee. And Clay has been recognized by NOAA Fisheries and received the Sustainable Fisheries Leadership Award. I don't know when that award is, Clay, but I'll have to ask, for science, research, and tech while managing the highly successful Hawaii Division of Aquatic Resources volunteer tagging program. So Clay, I want to hear a little bit more about when that award was, but first, we always like to start with the hard questions at Ocean Strategies with our interviews and esteemed guests. So we're going to go straight to it, Clay. Thank you for being here. And if you could tell us, where you're zooming in from, and then importantly, what is your favorite fish to cook, and how do you cook it in Hawaii?
Thank you, Brett. Happy to be here. I'm in the middle of Oahu in Honolulu, where my office is. Boy, you really did start with a tough question. Seriously, I mean, just because of the diversity out in the islands, I think a lot of what we consume is usually in the raw state. I mean, sashimi, you name it. We have it. We have a lot that comes over from Japan also, and just generally being able to taste the food in its original state and form, texture, flavors, very different, and it's a great experience doing that. And then, of course, because we have a bunch of different fish out here in the tropics, with especially our bottom fish fishery, which is what we're studying. And I feel that we have some of the best tasting fish out here. Paco, naga, some of those bottom fish are excellent. And for my background in being Chinese, it's steamed fish, and then every which other way you can cook fish is great. I mean, I love it. You name it.
The steamed fish, that would be your, like, if you had to pick, is there one or two that is like your favorite that you grew up with, and yeah, what makes it more tasty steamed?
Basically, we grew up in the Chinese style is very simple style. Right. It's steamed or poached, and then you put shoyu, green onion, ginger, and parsley, and then you put hot oil on it, and you sear it, and then that and a bowl of rice is all you need. It's all good. But we grew up like that from kid time. So back in the day it was mullet. Now for us, bottom fish is ehu, the ruby snapper, is probably one of the preferred ones that steams up well, but they all do that. So
I'd love to have a Alaska and Hawaii cook off here so we can share
that'd be awesome,
our favorite recipes, because
yes, that would be excellent. Black cod and
Ooh,
salmon. Oh my God.
ah,
That
buttery.
is, you got to try those recipes on black cod and those fish.
Okay.
It's like, and the rockfish. Oh, that is the one.
Okay.
That's the one.
Okay. So steam. Okay. I gotta, I grew up, eating a lot of, whether it's on a barbecue or a skillet, but never steamed that much. So I'm going to take this back and learn from some of your culture and tasty recipes, and maybe ask to borrow them. uh,
Awesome. That would be great because, I was up there just this past July at the shelter, and for me, I'm kind of a pescatarian, so I don't really eat meat. But they were able to prepare food, and they prepared a rockfish that was steamed. Oh my God, you got to try that.
okay. Well,
Definitely,
there's
definitely
always
recommend.
lots of connections between Alaskans and Hawaiians. We're the other folks, so we can share some recipes.
Definitely.
And so Clay, let's kind of transition from the tasty side to maybe a little bit more of the fishery management side, which can be spicy, maybe depending on how it's cooked. And you do a lot of various fisheries management processing work in your capacity. And you are, I believe, the chair for the AP, for the Western Pacific Fisheries Management Council, and you
Correct.
serve in several other fisheries advisory positions, and you have the opportunity to weigh in on really important issues affecting federal fisheries management in the Western Pacific. So what are some of the issues that are rising to the top for you right now, or what should be rising to the top that isn't getting enough attention?
Well, I think one of the bigger issues for us up here is, again, um, a proposal that closes some of the areas around the Pacific, remote island areas down south from us, places where our longline fleet fishes, and we've been shouldering the brunt of these closures in terms of conservation. I mean, if you look at our archipelago, and it's hard to fathom, but 75% of our EEZ is closed to fishing. Can you imagine 75% of your area being closed? We've lost 50% of our boundfish fishery to the north. We've lost our only commercial lobster fishery to the north. Our fishers can't go up there to fish.
Wow.
It's illegal. So this continued and expansion of that is going to be really a burden when you look at it. And the other thing that ties into this, and I think is going to be important, is the overview of 3030. When we talk about federal 3030, we talk about state 3030, and we're talking about international 3030. These closures put us at a huge disadvantage. I mean, we talk about EEJ and equity, but for the fleet out here, it is really difficult. I mean, we're probably one of the more highly managed fleets in the nation in terms of what we got to do to get out there and catch fish. I mean, bird, marine mammal mitigation, ESA, all those things, right, apply to these federal fisheries. So, those area closures are important because when you talk about climate change and people's like, oh, the fish may not be there or may move, that's when it's going to matter. It maybe they migrate there, or maybe they end up there, but if we can't access it, then yeah, it's going to be really difficult for us. But that's kind of what's on the horizon. And I think that looking at the immediate issues is with everybody is the inflation. I mean, it would be nice to have some subsidy like farmers get for fuel at least, or some provisions, because it's really cutting into the bottom line. And it's very difficult for our guys because 90% of our fleet fishes in international waters because we have no access to our own EEZ. So we're
Wow.
competing with the international guys out there, and it's very difficult, to go equip. And the pre-cost of going fishing out here is expensive because of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in Alaska, zooming right now at my parents' home in Homer, and I think I saw diesel was $5.70 a gallon. I can't imagine what it is, out there. I'm curious on the, both on inflation, as you were referencing. Like, I wish that, the fishing community and fishermen could sort of get the attention that we deserve in some of these decisions. Do you have any other examples of that, regarding costs, but also how are how are the input of fishermen on areas that are closed not being considered in 30 by 30? I'm hearing kind of a similarity here on needs of fishermen for help on inflationary costs, but also needs of fishermen to have their voice be heard in decisions like 30 by 30 because of loss of access. Is that something that has been more prevalent in your region lately, or has that been a struggle for a while?
Historically, if you look at when the archipelago, the Northwest Hawaiian Islands, is referred to as in the process of becoming, they're looking at turning it into a sanctuary. There was a long, arduous process. We had a fisherman on the voting panel, but one vote does not cut it. And when they, especially when they went out to public hearings and comments, a lot of it came from outside of the island. So when we look at the impact, it was overwhelming to have that kind of lobbying and that kind of input from outside when they wasn't on sort of like a level playing field for our local fleet. It was very difficult. Our voices were drowned definitely at these meetings, and then majority rules, right, in our country. So we end up in that situation out here. It's really tough. But when you look at the fishery itself, I think in terms of volume, we're not very highly ranked in terms of port. I mean, maybe top 10, but in terms of dollars, because it's all freshers market, I think we supply 50% of the swordfish to the nation. It's a big impact, and for our fleet, it's really important. Yeah.
So that's a really interesting topic, and it reminds me of visiting Puerto Rico and the learning more about the Caribbean Fishery Management Council, and how there's lots of islands, and regions that are coming together to try and form best management practices. And I'm hearing there's some similarities out in the Western Pacific, obviously, with but much bigger area, but islands and other, territories of the US that are being asked to be brought to the table. Yet on the example that you were describing, it doesn't sound like there was equitable representation. Sort of that procedural equity piece was sort of lacking from the commercial fishing standpoint on, where these protected areas are happening. How does the Western Pacific Fishery Management Council bring together different islands and voices into the fisheries management process? And how has that been similar or dissimilar to other processes that you've been part of, like the one we were kind of just talking about? I'm really kind of curious to learn.
Well, for the like the advisory panel that I chair, each of the island areas have representation. For Hawaii, we have 5 main islands. We have representatives from the 5 islands. So we lean on them to help us out with getting word out and doing things in the community. Likewise in the territory, same thing. When you look at the Northern Marianas, CNMI, they have Guam, Saipan. They also have 2 other populated islands, Rorota and Tinian, and they also have that similar problem of having representation. But they do have members on board, and now with virtual meetings, there's more opportunity for people to chime in and join the meetings, which has kind of been a blessing, because otherwise it's a lot of travel and a lot of time, right? So I mean, like we said, I mean, hopping on a plane from Hawaii to go down there and have a meeting, it's 7 hours one way, and it's like and so but we try our best to keep informed our community, and try to involve them. And from the AP side, since becoming chair, been trying to create projects that involve our committee people to go out in the community and engage in outreach. And a couple of projects that we've been able to do that has been fishermen's observations. And through time, it's always been that and empirical knowledge that has managed our fisheries prior to missionaries and being established as a state. So that has brought new light. It's now part of our safe report, annual safe report that the council puts in for our region. And it's become I think, and will be a valuable tool in the future. And when you talk about climate change and impacts, having information in addition to the catch and landings with temperature, currents, patterns, those things will eventually bring it to that level. I mean, a lot of what was here before incorporated that, but not on that technical level in terms of what we have today. So, we're trying to create that. We're trying to have a fish mapping project that we want. Then we ask the community to identify general areas of where, especially traditional fisheries, where it's been known, there's fishing shrines associated with, there's culturally significant, these areas we call koas or fish houses, certain places that really need to be identified and proposed, especially when you have impacts coming in from wind energy, alternative energy. We have wind farms now being put out there. You have a lot of impacts from tourist activities, jet skis, parasail. So these all have tremendous impact on our resource. And
Clay, are you finding oh, sorry to interrupt. Are you finding, I'm curious on you were mentioning the safe reports and sort of you've really helped lead from the AP, sort of getting that experiential knowledge for members to get out there, listen and learn, and sort of kind of understand better, and recognize sort of the value of a resource across people, across communities. Is that knowledge and sort of data being included in the management process? Is it actually being considered when tough decisions are made, or is it simply a box to check?
Right now, because I mean, I think we've had now, this will be the second year of collective information, but I've had a lot of interest from other committees, SSC, plan teams. They're all interested in information. The state guides are really interested for their management. And I think that maybe not so much of data, but again, the outreach and trying to open up that dialogue with our community. Hopefully it leads to a better understanding and connectivity with our managing agencies, with our community and the fisheries. There's always been that void. So, but hopefully in the future, because a lot of the trends, we know there's cycles out there, right? The La Nina and the El Nino. And so what's happening? I mean, scientists are at their desks, but fishermen are on the water every day, every single day, right? And if we can, again, work with fishermen, and our philosophy has always been fishermen should be part of the solution, not the problem. Collecting data. I mean, these guys might be remotely fishing, but if they got, devices where they collect temperature, current information, match it up and overlay with catch and, those stuff, where we can look at possibly looking at forecasts. Because in the past, when we refer to Hawaiian science, a lot of the science was based on existing environmental conditions. They would read the seaweed, rainfall, all of that was all tied into productivity, outcome, and what they would use to measure their productivity was really dialing in and knowing juvenile recruitment, because that would give them an idea of what harvest would be next year or further down the road, as you had this abundance. If they didn't show up, then something's going to be wrong in another year or two, right? And so with that said, there was a study done by Dr. Kevin Wang, and he looked at rainfall. We had data from 1949 in a commercial marine landing report from the state. And when he looked at rainfall levels from that time till now, and then from the landings of our what they call Big Eye Scad, our coulee, which is very in tune with those signals, he saw a direct correlation with productivity and rainfall. So you'd have rainfall one year, and then 2 years later, you would have this bumper crop of these fish, and it fit like a glove. But we knew then that, and it was just a hunch that these were important to the resource in terms of water flow and fresh water and this whole ecosystem understanding, right? And so now apply that model to the other fish and the other fisheries, right? And so it kind of opened the door for that. And that's kind of what we're hoping to see here, using commercial landing data and so forth, and looking back and then forward, right? In terms of fishery management, integrating that into some sort of model that can be applied, right? And maybe forecast and predict our fisheries.
Yeah, and including that, it's one thing to kind of, and I love that community approach of kind of getting to that human side, so people can just see it, hear each other, actually hear each other, listen, be heard, and then also understand where there could be information that already exists or could exist. And though it may not have the perfect matchup in what the model currently has, it could still have huge impact in a positive way to inform it. We just have to figure out how to do that, because you might be having, one language kind of speak the same dialect, but they're just not communicating. And I'd be curious, to first just learn more about those efforts. In Alaska, the council travels to different regions, but it's still really tough sometimes to access, and the kind of the Zoom world has really opened up access to rural Alaskans, or to anybody, to be able to participate virtually. And so my kind of last question, and anything else you want to add, feel free, is, what are your recommendations for U.S. fisheries management to become more adaptive or inclusive with various sets of research and information and data coming from many stakeholders? How can U.S. fisheries management, in a more equitable fashion, include information that'll help the management process?
That's a good question. And the basis today and the buzzword since I've joined has been ecosystem-based management. But in order to do that, I give you an example right here, and it's not their fault or anybody's fault, but we have now our science center that's been NOAA has been relocated to a Fort Island in Pearl Harbor, and so you have fisheries, weather service, protected species, all in one huge building, all right. But the thing is that they're not integrated in terms of level of management. They're all in their little silos doing their own thing. And so when you ask about weather, they're like, oh, I gotta go ask them. I said, but my observation is this, I see that, and it's like this whole thing that needs to be sort of put into a dialogue or some sort of framework in terms of managing, and hopefully looking down the road and knowing some of the stuff that I knew from before, maybe that can be integrated to some sort of process. Because when I studied some of the Hawaiian fisheries, one of the fisheries that has a cycle and ends up being a 60-year cycle, amazingly, but almost to the day it's 60 years. It always occurs. This run of fish comes and it's 60 years. And in the past, Hawaiians, some of them didn't live that long, so it was actually a generational thing. But through legends and chants, that has lived on. Those dates were recorded back from the time they started actually being able to record and write Hawaiian and English. That someone had to be translated. So I was able to live that with my kids in our generation, and projecting toward the future. 60 years from now, I'm not going to be here, but maybe their kids will be, and they'll be able to understand that. And some of the pelagics, when you talk to like our commercial charter guys, there's a 5-year cycle for striped marlin. There's a 10-year cycle for mai. So those things are super important because they knew. And even looking at something as simple as one of the theories is that when we have a strong mango bloom season, right, the ahi yellowfin will be a good run. And it's true, because these elements and this change in environment occurs way, way, way in advance. And so it all builds up into this, like I said, this kind of predictability. And so the guys get excited when we have a lot of mangoes out here. And some seasons you have a lot of flowers, the wind comes, knocks them down, and or there's rain and a fungus. But generally, if it's a strong indicator, things line up. And it's really interesting listening to some of the old time guys talk about, you know, these things in the environment that signal to them that there were certain elements, and one of them was this older guy, and not to get long winded, but
No,
one of
that's
it was
I'm fascinated.
when
Please.
I was at DAR, I follow up on catch reports, right? I just to verify someone in, and this guy goes, "Oh, you know what? Can I call you back?" "Oh, sure, call me back." So he's over there, and then he calls me back, and then he goes, "Oh, sorry, I had to go feed my cows." "Oh yeah, no problems. Go feed the cows, right?" And then he tells me, "Did you realize that when the cows are feeding in the pasture, the fish are biting in the ocean?" I said, "What? No way!" And he goes, "Yeah, there's a biological clock that in nature, when they're feeding, it's simultaneous both sides." And I actually ground truthed that one time because where I was fishing up in the North Shore and I passed the dairy. Sure enough, you know, cows were actively feeding, went fishing, stopped biting, left, and then the cows were just sitting in the pasture. It's like,
So you're telling me like at the end of coho season here in Alaska, I need to get in touch with some cow farmers up in like Matanuska Valley here in Alaska, figure out when the cows are actually eating, and I might have better luck catching a coho because I'm on to this. I like this, but you're right. You know, it's back to what we were saying earlier about you're giving the example. I forget about you know, water runoff and rainwater. I mean, this is not new news, but you know, depending on how much not new news for in Alaska, what you're saying, I find it new for your region because I don't know. But in Alaska, you know, with salmon returning to their natal streams, you know, obviously those are freshwater fed and sourced areas, and in times when there is less rainwater, it can dramatically impact the return of the species in 4 to 5 years, depending on survival rates and water temperatures and feed. And there's all these crazy things happening, you know, depending on what happened 5 years ago, and you can kind of look ahead. And that's a pretty cool example, both on the rainwater and the was it mangoes?
yeah, correct. I mean, one quick one, if I may.
Yeah.
Even this year coming up to Alaska, we usually try to get there on every. It's an odd even year thing, right? On the salmon run, at least in the area that we fish, and it's silvers, pinks, right, and the kings. So kind of based on that, we usually try to target that mid-July kind of timing, early August, so we can get kind of an overlap of all those species. But this year we got up there, and it was mostly pinks. There was just a smidge of others. We did get lucky, and I finally used my king stamp, and it was successful. So and then that's after about 10 years of fishing there. But that cycle, yeah, I mean, we missed the silver run by a couple of weeks, but definitely, you know, the lodge guys are saying it's been a dry winter, not much rainfall, so it doesn't seem like the salmons were recruiting as fast up. And then the salmon recruitment seemed to especially up in that area, was that the halibut, right? They'll follow the salmons up until they get upstream, and then they start feeding on them, whatnot. So that whole thing was off. Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
So you have that kind of predictability in some of the fisheries. And you know, looking at the I forget what glacier it is in Juneau, but we usually run up there and take a look at it. But you know, from the time we started coming up there till now, yeah, it's receded quite a bit. So
Yeah.
not saying it's gonna run out, but at some point in time, you would think that if there was any way of measuring just volumes of water or rainfall or whatever, that might be a good indicator to start looking at in general. And
Sure.
in terms of looking at annual runs and tying it into some of the different fisheries, yeah, I think it's really important. But for the Hawaiian Islands, especially the main islands, the rainfall and even some of the stream animals have evolved over time, right? And so a lot of it is this evolutional type of fishery in terms of, you know, fishery in estuaries and then out in the deeper water. But you know, when you look at the base of the food chain, algae is all important out here, super important. And without that, it's problematic. And right now we have a problem. You know, we don't have, and their state is talking about herbivore management. And but on the other hand too, you know, the other thing that was an impact to the fisheries was the closing of our green sea turtle harvest, right? And so now we've had papers written by scientists from NOAA saying, hey, you know what? wouldn't be a problem if you manage that as a fishery today. I mean, I'm not saying open up the door and everybody go hunt turtles, but they are impacting a lot of areas that our guys go dive, and they've overgrazed a lot of areas. There's no seaweed, which feeds other fish other than the turtles, right? And so this whole, like I said, you need this kind of holistic approach in terms of the fishery management, because they're all interrelated at some point, right? And like our friend Richard is started and found squid up in that area of Juneau. We went up there and hooked them, and his concern is that if the squid is there, when the young salmon start to exit the mountains and streams, these squids might be impacting that population.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, everything has these ripple effects, and,
right.
and maybe I've just jaded too long working in fish politics, but I don't really believe in coincidences. And nature could tell you that, if something's following.
Yeah, and you look at some of the tropical pelagics that have moved up north and out of Oregon, California, it's like never before, and
mackerel in Alaska.
Yeah.
I mean, hello, it's just crazy.
That's why those are the things we need to be paying attention to. And the guys that tell us that are the fishermen, because they could see it first, right? Yeah. So to start to document those immediately and have those recorded, that's where I see the importance of the fisherman's observation. And you're going to have these signals coming, but it's all going to be important. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate the
conversation
today, Clay. No, I could go on, and I'm really looking at the time and realizing that I've taken up more than I asked of your valuable time, and I really appreciate it. And I, just very much look forward to what I see as this forward-thinking, collaborative sort of approach of a lot of people that's been around in fisheries management since the beginning, but really kind of this next generation coming in and asking these hard questions and asking ourselves hard questions and then finding where we can collaborate and find data or trends that the elders have seen and bring that into the management process, because we're the ones also seeing the impacts today.
Right.
I really just appreciate your time and educating us on the region. And I can't wait to visit you one day very soon, hopefully, and just work together. And I just can't thank you enough for your time and your lifetime of work with protecting our resources. And so thank you for joining us today with Ocean Strategies.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to join you. And yeah, we'll talk for more anytime. So we cannot do it again, but yeah, looking forward to seeing you. And yeah, when you get here, give me a call.
I will.
We get together.
I will.